Shattered steel, broken spirit. The battlefield was silent now. Not long ago, the sky above planet Virus had been painted with streaks of fire, warships clashing in violent explosions. The ground was littered with the remnants of a brutal conflict, shattered weapons, broken armor, and bodies that would never rise again. Among the debris, a figure lay motionless, her breath shallow, her body battered. Leora, once a fierce warrior of the Viren race, had been left for dead. Her dark violet skin was streaked with dust and blood, and the intricate silver plating of her armor was fractured beyond repair. She had failed. Her unit had been ambushed by human forces, outnumbered and outmaneuvered. When she fell, the others had fled. Her commander, Captain Thalen, had deemed her a lost cause. A disgraceful death, alone and abandoned. But she was not alone. Footsteps crunched against the rubble, drawing closer. A human. He moved cautiously, his gaze scanning the wreckage before settling on her. He wasn't a soldier. He wore no armor, carried no weapon. Instead, his arms were filled with salvaged mechanical parts, his utility belt weighed down with tools. A scavenger. Leora wanted to reach for her blade, but her body refused to move. Her vision blurred, the world tilting dangerously as exhaustion pulled at her. The human crouched beside her, brushing away the dust that coated the symbols on her chest plate. His expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "You're still alive," he murmured, more to himself than to her. Leora forced her lips to move. "Leave me." Her voice was weak, but the command was clear. The human didn't listen. Instead, he exhaled sharply, setting his things aside before pulling a small device from his belt. A portable scanner. "I'm not leaving you here," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "You're injured." "Badly." Leora turned her head slightly, eyes narrowing. "Why, would a human help me?" He didn't answer immediately. The scanner beeped as he assessed her injuries, fractured ribs, internal bleeding, and a damaged neural link within her armor. His jaw tightened at the results. "Because I can," he finally said. She stared at him, searching for deception. Humans and Virens had been at war for decades. She had been raised to believe they were ruthless, selfish creatures who only sought destruction. Yet this one did not look at her like an enemy. Her body betrayed her before she could question him further. Darkness closed in, and the last thing she saw was his determined expression as he reached for her. Leora woke to the hum of machinery. Her body ached, but she was alive. She was lying on a makeshift cot, surrounded by walls constructed from salvaged metal. Strange tools and mechanical parts cluttered the space, and the air smelled of oil and heated circuits. A repair shop. She tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in her ribs forced her back down. A quiet chuckle came from across the room. "Take it easy," the human said. He was hunched over a workbench, repairing a piece of tech that looked eerily similar to her armor's core processor. "You took quite a beating." Leora's gaze flickered to her body. Her armor had been removed, leaving only the form-fitting underlayer Viren warriors wore beneath their plating. A dull ache ran through her limbs, but her wounds had been treated, and her skin was no longer caked in blood. She struggled to find the right words. "You fixed me?" His dark brown hair was slightly unkempt, and his face bore the marks of someone who had spent more time around machines than people. His clothing was practical, worn from use, but not military-issued. "You are not a soldier," she observed. A small smirk crossed his lips. "Nope. Name's Ethan. I'm a mechanic." Leora remained silent, her mind racing. A mechanic. That explained the workshop. But it didn't explain why he had saved her. She pushed herself upright with a wince. "You should have left me there." Ethan leaned against his workbench, crossing his arms. "Yeah, well, I didn't. She frowned. I am Viren. We are at war. Ethan shrugged. So? Leora blinked. So, we are enemies. The human sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, I'm not interested in war. I fix things. Machines, weapons, sometimes even people. If I see something broken, I try to repair it. That's just who I am. Leora wasn't sure how to respond to that. No human had ever spoken to her this way before, without fear, without hatred. She looked around the room, her eyes landing on a familiar sight. Her armor. It had been placed carefully on a nearby table, its broken pieces arranged as if awaiting reconstruction. Ethan followed her gaze. I was just about to start working on it. Your tech is incredible. Damaged as hell, but incredible. She hesitated. Why? Why what? Why are you fixing my armor? Ethan met her eyes, his expression unreadable. Because something tells me you're not done fighting. Leora's breath caught in her throat. He was right. As much as she had been ready to accept death on that battlefield, a part of her still burned with purpose. But fighting for what? Her people had abandoned her. The war had left nothing but destruction in its wake. For the first time in her life, Leora found herself questioning everything she had ever known. And for the first time, a human was offering her another choice. Forging trust in broken steel. Leora sat in silence, watching Ethan work. His hands moved with practiced precision, welding, adjusting, and rewiring the delicate circuits of her armor. Sparks flickered in the dimly lit workshop, casting fleeting shadows across the cluttered space. She had been trained to fight, to kill, to destroy. Yet here she was, relying on a human, a supposed enemy, to rebuild the very thing that had defined her existence. The quiet hum of machinery was the only sound between them until Leora finally spoke. You are skilled. Ethan didn't glance up. Thanks. She studied his expression. Where did you learn? He shrugged. Grew up fixing things. My dad was an engineer. Taught me everything he knew before. He hesitated, then refocused on his work. Before he was drafted into the war. Leora caught the brief flicker of emotion in his voice. She knew better than to pry. War stole from both sides, leaving scars that never truly healed. Instead, she shifted her gaze to the scattered components of her armor. My neural link was damaged. Can you repair it? Ethan sighed, placing his tools down. It's tricky. The interface is advanced, far beyond human tech. I've never worked with Viren neural circuits before. He met her eyes. But I can try. Leora clenched her fists. Without the neural link, she would be half a warrior, unable to sync her instincts with the suit's capabilities. She should have felt anger at his uncertainty. Instead, she felt something else. Hope. A human willing to try. She exhaled slowly. Then do it. Ethan smirked. Thought you'd say that. An unexpected bond. The next few days passed in a rhythm of quiet cooperation. Leora healed. Ethan repaired. Though her body ached, she forced herself to move, testing her limits. She would not remain weak for long. Meanwhile, Ethan toiled over her armor, unraveling Viren technology with fascination and determination. He worked late into the nights, muttering to himself as he deciphered the intricacies of her neural interface. Leora found herself watching him more often than she should have. His patience, his dedication, it was nothing like the brutality she had been taught to expect from humans. One evening, as Ethan carefully adjusted a damaged energy conduit, Leora finally asked, "Why did you save me?" Ethan didn't look up. Told you already. I fix things. She frowned. That is not an answer. He sighed, setting down his tools. Maybe not. He met her gaze, his expression unreadable. Truth is, I don't know. Maybe I was tired of watching people throw lives away. Maybe I saw something in you, something worth saving. Leora's breath caught. She was not used to such honesty. And what do you see in me? She asked. Ethan leaned back, considering her for a moment. Someone who's lost more than she admits. Leora's chest tightened. He was right. Before she could respond, a sharp beeping sound echoed through the workshop. Ethan snapped his head toward the source, a small terminal displaying a flashing alert. His face darkened. Damn it. Leora sat up. What is it? Ethan moved quickly, typing into the console. A scouting drone just detected movement near the outer perimeter. Her muscles tensed. Who? Ethan's jaw clenched. Military patrol. Human. And they're heading straight for us. The cost of kindness. Leora stood immediately, ignoring the lingering soreness in her body. They will kill you if they find out you have been harboring me. Ethan cursed under his breath. Not if they don't find out. He grabbed a small handheld device from his workbench and activated it. A holographic map of the area flickered to life, displaying a series of red markers approaching their location. There's a hidden exit through the back, he said quickly. But they'll be searching the area. Leora glanced at her incomplete armor. She wasn't at full strength without it. But she wasn't defenseless either. You should not be involved in this, she said. Ethan snorted. Kind of late for that, don't you think? Leora hesitated. If they discover you helped me, they will not spare you. His expression softened, but his voice was firm. Then we make sure they don't find out. She met his gaze, something unspoken passing between them. Trust. Leora had never trusted a human before. But Ethan wasn't like the others. And she wasn't ready to lose him. Hunted in the shadows. The distant hum of engines grew louder as the military patrol neared the workshop. Ethan moved swiftly, shutting down the overhead lights and activating a low-power emergency mode. The workshop fell into dim shadows, the only illumination coming from the faint blue glow of exposed wiring and screens. Leora stood by the back in trance, body tense, ready to fight. But without her fully repaired armor, she knew the odds weren't in her favor. How many are there? She asked in a hushed tone. Ethan checked the holographic map. 4 soldiers. Armed. Standard patrol gear, but they might have an exosuit. He glanced at her. You're not in any shape to take them on. Leora's jaw tightened. She hated feeling weak. Then what do you suggest? Ethan's mind worked quickly. We hide. If they come inside, I'll talk to them. They don't need to know you're here. Leora hesitated. Hiding felt dishonorable. But she also wasn't foolish. A direct fight would be reckless. She nodded. Fine. Where? Ethan gestured toward a maintenance hatch near the floor. Crawl space. It's shielded from scanners. Stay quiet. Leora eyed the small space with distaste but obeyed. She slipped inside, her breathing slow and controlled. Ethan sealed the hatch just as the sound of boots echoed outside. A sharp knock rattled the workshop door. Ethan took a deep breath and opened it. A dangerous encounter. A soldier stood in the doorway, helmet gleaming under the moonlight. Behind him, 3 others fanned out, scanning the perimeter with handheld detectors. Ethan Voss, the lead soldier asked, his voice distorted through his helmet speaker. Ethan nodded, keeping his expression neutral. That's me. The soldier glanced past him into the dimly lit workshop. We detected unusual energy readings from this location. We're investigating potential enemy activity. Ethan forced a casual shrug. Just me here. Been working on a few old projects. Maybe a power fluctuation tripped your sensors. The soldier didn't move. Mind if we take a look around? Ethan knew he had no choice. Sure. The soldiers stepped inside, their heavy boots thudding against the floor. They swept their scanners over the workbenches, past the unfinished armor, the scattered tools. Ethan kept his hands at his sides, calm despite his racing heart. You've been fixing old combat gear, one soldier remarked, tapping on a rusted exosuit frame. Scrap salvage, Ethan replied smoothly. Nothing functional. Just a hobby. Another soldier hovered near the hatch where Leora was hidden. Ethan tensed. The soldier's scanner beeped. Ethan's stomach dropped. What's in here? The soldier asked, knocking on the hatch. Ethan stepped forward, masking his nerves. Storage. Old power cells and wiring. Nothing valuable. The soldier hesitated, then reached for the hatch handle. Leora held her breath, her fingers tightening around the small blade she had concealed. If they found her, she would have to fight. And she wasn't sure she could protect Ethan in the process. The soldier began to pull the hatch open. Then another voice cut through the tension. Sergeant. We've got movement outside. The lead soldier turned sharply. Position? North sector. Could be a stray. The sergeant gave one last glance at Ethan before stepping back. Stay inside, Voss. If we find anything, we'll be back. Ethan nodded, forcing an easy smile. Understood. The soldiers filed out, their footsteps fading into the night. Ethan waited until the patrol was far enough before exhaling deeply. He moved to the hatch, opening it swiftly. Leora emerged, eyes sharp. That was close. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. Too close. She studied his face. You risked your life for me again. He chuckled dryly. Guess I have a habit of bad decisions. Leora tilted her head. Or perhaps, you are simply good. Ethan met her gaze, surprised by the rare softness in her tone. For the first time, he saw not just a warrior in her eyes, but someone who wanted to believe in something more. A new mission. The danger had passed for now, but it was clear, staying here was no longer safe. Ethan turned back to the half-repaired armor. We need to finish this fast. Your suit needs to be functional before they return. Leora nodded. And then? Ethan hesitated, then said, we get you out of here. Somewhere safe. Leora frowned. And you? Ethan smirked. Guess I'll figure that out later. Leora studied him carefully. For the first time in a long time, she felt something unexpected. Not just gratitude, but a desire to protect someone else. Even if it meant breaking the rules she had lived by her entire life. Escape through the storm. The wind howled outside the workshop, sending loose metal sheets rattling. A sandstorm was rolling in, a rare but powerful event that could obscure visibility for hours. Ethan glanced at Leora, who was fastening the last pieces of her repaired armor. Sparks danced from the welding torch as she secured the plating over her shoulder. We don't have much time, he said, pulling up a map on his holographic display. There's a transport route through the canyon. If we move now, we can use the storm as cover. Leora tested the movement in her armor, rolling her shoulders. It wasn't at full capacity, but it would hold. And what happens when we get to the canyon? Ethan hesitated. We split up. Leora froze. What? They're looking for you, not me. If we travel together, we're both targets. But if I stay behind and throw them off, you have a chance to make it out. Her expression hardened. You expect me to abandon you? Ethan exhaled. I expect you to survive. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The storm outside grew stronger, dust swirling against the windows. Finally, Leora looked away. Fine, she muttered. But I don't like it. Ethan smiled slightly. You don't have to. Into the storm. They left the workshop just as the first waves of sand and wind swallowed the landscape. Visibility dropped to near zero, the air thick with swirling dust. Ethan pulled his scarf tighter around his face while Leora's helmet sealed automatically. Through the storm, they moved swiftly, guided only by the faint blue light of Leora's scanner. The plan was simple: reach the canyon, split up, and hope for the best. But nothing ever went as planned. As they neared the canyon ridge, red warning signals flickered across Leora's visor. Movement. We have company, she said. Ethan barely had time to react before a searchlight pierced through the storm. Halt, a voice boomed through the haze. Soldiers. At least 6. They had followed them. Leora clenched her fists. They found us faster than expected. Ethan's heart pounded. We can't fight them all. Leora scanned the terrain. We don't need to. We just need to get to the edge. She grabbed Ethan's arm and sprinted. Shots rang out behind them, blue streaks of energy slicing through the sand. Leora raised her arm, her armor's shield flickering to life just in time to block a shot aimed at Ethan. They reached the canyon's edge, a steep drop into darkness. Ethan skidded to a stop. Please don't tell me we're jumping. Leora smirked beneath her helmet. Would you rather stay here? Ethan swore under his breath. I hate this plan. She grabbed him just as another blast erupted behind them. And together, they leaped into the abyss. Fall into the unknown. The wind roared past them as they fell. Leora activated her suit's thrusters at the last second, slowing their descent. Ethan, lacking such technology, braced for impact as they landed on a sloping rock face. He rolled, hitting the ground hard but still intact. Leora landed gracefully beside him, scanning their surroundings. They were deep in the canyon now, hidden from sight. The storm above raged on, masking their escape. Ethan groaned, pushing himself up. Remind me to never do that again. Leora chuckled. Noted. But their relief was short-lived. From the shadows of the canyon, movement stirred. Not soldiers. Something else. Leora's visor flickered with warnings. Ethan narrowed his eyes. What now? Leora raised her weapon. We're not alone. The final stand. The canyon walls loomed high above, jagged and shadowed by the dim light filtering through the raging sandstorm. Leora's visor flickered as it struggled to process the movement in the darkness. Ethan instinctively reached for his weapon, his pulse hammering in his chest. What exactly are we dealing with? He whispered. Leora's grip on her blaster tightened. Something old, and not human. The shadows moved again. A low growl echoed through the canyon, reverberating off the stone walls. Then, a pair of glowing yellow eyes emerged from the darkness, followed by another, and another. Ethan took an involuntary step back. Great. Because mercenaries weren't enough trouble already. From the darkness, massive, reptilian creatures slithered forward. Their elongated bodies coiled around the rock formations, scales reflecting the faint blue glow from Leora's armor. Canyon wraiths, Leora muttered. Apex predators. They hunt anything that moves. Ethan swallowed hard. Fantastic. And what's our plan? Leora glanced around. We don't fight them. We outmaneuver them. Ethan sighed. I was afraid you'd say that. The chase. The wraith struck without warning. One lunged at Leora with lightning speed, its massive fangs snapping inches from her face. She twisted away, firing a rapid burst from her blaster. The shots barely slowed the creature down. Ethan scrambled up a rock formation, narrowly avoiding a sweeping tail that smashed into the ground where he had stood seconds before. Dust and debris clouded the air. Up! Leora shouted. They're slower on the higher ground. Ethan didn't need to be told twice. He climbed, muscles burning as he pulled himself up a steep ridge. Leora followed, leaping onto a ledge above him. The wraiths hissed in frustration, their massive bodies struggling to scale the uneven terrain. But they were persistent. One of them lunged, its powerful tail slamming into the rock face. The force sent Ethan tumbling backward. He barely managed to grab onto an outcropping, his fingers slipping against the jagged stone. Ethan! Leora reached for him, but the wraiths were closing in. Ethan's grip failed. He fell. A desperate move. The air rushed past Ethan as he plummeted toward the canyon floor. He barely had time to react before Leora dived after him, her thrusters kicking in at the last second. She caught his arm, the momentum swinging them toward a narrow rock bridge. They landed hard, rolling to a stop. Ethan groaned, clutching his ribs. I officially hate running for my life. Leora smirked, helping him up. It builds character. The wraiths circled above, unable to reach them for now. But they wouldn't give up easily. We need an escape route, Ethan said, scanning the area. Leora's visor pinged a faint energy reading further into the canyon. There's a passage ahead. If we make it through, we can lose them in the tunnels. Ethan sighed. More running, then? She nodded. He cracked his knuckles. Let's do this. The final choice. They sprinted through the narrow canyon pass, the ground trembling as the wraiths gave chase. The tunnel entrance was just ahead, a narrow crack in the rock face barely wide enough to squeeze through. Leora reached it first, slipping inside. Ethan followed, feeling the hot breath of the wraiths behind him. As soon as he was through, Leora fired a shot at the rock ceiling. The tunnel collapsed. A deafening crash echoed through the canyon as dust and debris sealed them inside. The wraiths roared in frustration on the other side, but the collapse held. Ethan coughed, waving away the dust. I hope you're good at navigating caves. Leora chuckled. I guess we'll find out. For the first time in days, they weren't being hunted. They had survived. A new path. As they wandered deeper into the tunnels, the glow from Leora's armor casting long shadows, Ethan glanced at her. So, what now? Leora hesitated. I was supposed to return to my people. But after everything that's happened, I don't know if that's still possible. Ethan studied her. You don't have to go back. You could stay. Find your own path. Leora met his gaze, something unspoken passing between them. And where would that path lead? Ethan smiled. Wherever we want it to. She considered his words, then nodded. I think I'd like that. And as they walked together into the unknown, the future no longer seemed so uncertain. They had rebuilt more than just her armor. They had rebuilt hope. The end.